Well, the Pat Narduzzi era at Pitt is not over. And you know what? That's kind of a good thing for Pitt. Shockingly, that's actually a positive for the University of Pittsburgh and the Pitt football program. Although the entire speculation and the rumor mill and the entire reason Pat Narduzzi even had to answer these questions in his signing day press conference was also a bit presumptuous of Pitt Nation, of even Narduzzi himself, and a bit odd in a way about the possible rumors of him leaving Pitt for Michigan State. But either way, he stays, and again, there's some positive in that for Pitt. I am your host, Mike Asti, and this is a Pitt football, I guess, or a Pitt off-season edition, Pitt football off-season rumor mill edition of Mic Drop on Pittsburgh Sports Live, brought to you by Beaver County Auto, and of course, the mothership for this broadcast, Pittsburgh Sports Now. And Pat Narduzzi, he had to say it. He had to answer the questions. Okay, in the midst of his sign day press conference, it wasn't just about his next class. It wasn't just about the future of Pitt on the field. It wasn't about his recruiting class, which, despite a mediocre resume and a mediocre tenure at the helm of the University of Pittsburgh, Pat Narduzzi has actually recruited well. He's recruited well in the WPIL. He's recruited well in the region. He's recruited well in general. He has not recruited a quarterback, as Kenny Pickett's not that guy, but he's recruited a defense. He's recruited well overall, I guess you could say, aside from the quarterback position, and recruited maybe better than many give him credit. It hasn't translated enough to wins on the field, and there's been more mediocre seasons than, say, a season that they get into the conference championship game because they win a mediocre division. But regardless, he has brought some stability and some continuity to the University of Pittsburgh, which they hadn't had for a while prior to him. The reason why this was even a question and the reason why this was a rumor, partly for Pitt fans, harkens back to Paul Chryst and how many thought that, like Paul Chryst, Pat Narduzzi was just in an internship with Pitt, just buying his time until the Michigan State job was open. And as he even said, he was very surprised of D'Antonio deciding to step away, and not as surprising when you see that that was in the midst of scandal. But regardless, he steps away with a pretty illustrious Hall of Fame caliber resume based on what he's done for a school like Michigan State. And Paul Chryst, who grew up loving Wisconsin, had the Wisconsin blood, had the Wisconsin schooling, was an alum of Wisconsin, grew up under the Wisconsin program, ended up leaving Pitt for Wisconsin, so they figured that could be the same type of thing with Narduzzi, similar for Michigan State. Now, it didn't end up being the case. It did not. And while many Pitt fans might have been okay with seeing him go, because as I'm going to show you here, he hasn't exactly impressed in terms of record. Pat Narduzzi at Pitt, 2015 to now, 8-5, that's good. 8-5, that's good. Then back-to-back 5-7. They had that upset against Clemson in the middle there. We, of course, know about Clemson's dynasty and how big of a deal that was. They knock off Miami and kind of derail their season towards the end. So, like the Dave Wannstedt era, mediocre mostly, some okay, good seasons, and then a mix-in of major upsets, which are the staple and the major point of the tenure so far. 8-5 this past season in 2019. Some maybe thought that could have been a 9 or 10 win season. I didn't think so. Some could have thought that maybe they should have won 8 or 9 games. Some of those other years, they failed to win more than 8 any of those years. Of course, winning a bowl game this past season, despite it being a mediocre bowl game, or lower than mediocre, because Pitt's not getting solid tie-ins, Pitt's not getting solid selections. If Pitt doesn't win a division, they end up with a pretty bad bowl game, whether that's because of fans traveling or whatever the case may be. They kind of do get screwed there, and then losing those prior bowl games. Overall, 36-29, 554 on the win clip. That's about an average, mediocre, a little above 500 record at Pitt. And while Pitt fans may want more, may feel like the history of the Pitt program and the Hall of Famers that have been there, the Tony Dorsett, Dan Marino, the 76 national title year, the Orange Bowl years, even going back to a BCS Fiesta Bowl in the early 2000s under Walt Harris, and even going back way further, the 30s, 40s, etc., when I could make this argument forever that Pitt doesn't really deserve those national titles, like many of the schools don't deserve those national titles they claimed then, because either they were one of several teams that were undefeated, or they actually lost a couple games, or they didn't even win the last game of the year, or it's just kind of made up rankings and they weren't consensus in any of the rankings. It was before there was even a confusion on who was ranked what. Pitt was just claiming titles and actually didn't claim 8 of their 9 national titles until 30 years after the games were played, mostly for recruiting. But I'll digress. They were still a very successful program. The history was there. The wins were there, whether they're national titles for real or not. Regardless, it's still a pretty successful historic program in the annals of college football. Not the case the last 30 years, though, of course, and certainly not the case the last decade or so. There's been those major upsets, even going back to WVU, my alma mater, I'll admit, back in 2007 to derail them. But again, not too many wins to write home about besides those major upsets. Those years overall weren't that amazing. However, Pitt does manage to now finally have some continuity. And that's why Pat Narduzzi staying is actually a good thing. You may not get this because maybe you're sick and you want more and feel like he's underachieved, and the only special year he won a mediocre division and took advantage of rules and took advantage of down seasons by Miami and other teams, and then got blown out to Clemson, and those years are going to be few and far between, and it wasn't really a great team, but they managed to take advantage of bad teams and get in that game and then didn't press. I get it. Maybe you want more for the program, okay? I would want more for the program too if I were you. But you're no longer dealing with coaches who are leaving every few years. You're no longer dealing with coaches who claim this to really be an internship and don't really want to be there. Again, Pat Narduzzi makes it clear, despite having the rumors, despite maybe Michigan State being interested in him, and I'll get to whether that was true or not in a minute. Regardless, though, rumors squash them, Narduzzi said. I'm here at Pitt, and that's where I want to be. So Pat Narduzzi's emphatic there. And of course, nothing's for sure in college football. He could end up leaving next week. He could leave a year from now. Nothing would surprise anybody. College coaches move around like musical chairs, and they face no punishment, and they get buyouts, and it's not like the kids. They can do whatever they want, really. And that could still be the case with Narduzzi. But Narduzzi staying would be better. Because let me put you this way. Not only do you finally want some continuity, and not only has there been some successful seasons there, and even though you're no longer the Pitt of Dan Marino or Tony Dorsett, you're a mediocre program. You have a ceiling. West Virginia has it too. Okay, there's a mediocre ceiling that you have that maybe every now and then you can compete for a conference title, probably never a national title. The playoff maybe once in a decade if you're lucky. 8, 9 win seasons, maybe 10, which WVU's had and Pitt has not, but regardless, those would be the special years. So, for where Pitt realistically is, if you truly want to admit it, Narduzzi's not been great at all, and I'm not even going to say he's been good, and there's reason to criticize. Certainly bungled up the game against Penn State. He messed up some games this past season. But the main point of it is, and sucks to say, things could absolutely be much worse at Pitt, and who else are you really going to get? Think about that. If Narduzzi walks and goes to Michigan State or even goes anywhere, or you finally fire him, who are you going to get if you're Pitt? This, again, isn't Pitt of Dan Marino or Tony Dorsett. This isn't even Pitt with Walt Harris, where they were able to take advantage of BCS rules and win a conference every now and then and get in the BCS bowl game in the Fiesta Bowl despite getting blown out. That's not even the college football we're in right now. This is a harder college football. Yes, they have the ability, unlike, say, WVU in the Big 12, where they have to be the one or the two to get in the conference title game. Pitt can win a poor division and get in that conference championship game, and maybe every now and then they'll get an upset chance. They probably won't win that game, but every now and then they'll get that chance. Do you really believe anybody else coming into Pitt will do that much better of a job? Well, if Narduzzi's gone next year and somebody else is hired, are they immediately going to win 10 or 11 games? No. Are they going to do that much better than Narduzzi's done over the next 3 to 4 to 5 years? It's a bitter pill to swallow. It kind of sucks to say, but the answer is no, they won't be. There is a ceiling at Pitt. There is a ceiling at West Virginia. There's a little higher ceiling at Penn State for sure, I'll say that because of the Big Ten. But there's a ceiling at those type of schools, at most of our regional schools. And a couple 8-win seasons, coming off an 8-win season, regardless of what happens in the conference. And yes, there are games they should have won and there's underachieving going on. But it could be much worse. There's no, unless you bring in, unless you just hire an assistant that you have, or you resurrect somebody and you promote them from a job they didn't normally have, or you try to promote somebody down, or you try to give them a better job and make assistant a head coach. You could do any of that. And yes, it happened with Narduzzi. But there's no splash hire that's going to happen. The reality is there's no head coaches with any clout or who can immediately turn around a program. There's no Urban Meyers out there or Nick Sabans out there that could walk in, bring in recruits, and in 2 to 3 years all of a sudden turn that program into a powerhouse like you think and like it should be and like it was in the past. It could be much worse. You probably are looking at, if Narduzzi's gone, you're looking at a next coach not having the same system, not having his system in place, needing to get his kids in there, needing a few years to get his system and his kids in there and have things done right. And then will you give him time? Because you'll need to, really. You'll need 3 or 4 years for a college coach, especially at that type of program. That's why I've argued, and if you go back through the channel in the mic drop section here in Pittsburgh Sports Live, go down below, and as I said in the previous banner, subscribe to the channel when you're there. That's why West Virginia needs to give Neil Brown time for a couple years. You're with a new coach. You're with a new system. You're with new recruits. Yes, it was a bad year this past season, but you got to give a new coach like that time. You can't be mad after 1 year. But that's where Pitt would be if Narduzzi was gone. They would be rebuilding all over again. They'd be rebuilding that program like West Virginia now is with Neil Brown. So that's the positive of Pat Narduzzi staying. Now, on the other end of things, it might have been a bit presumptuous that Pat Narduzzi wasn't going to stay, or that you were even freaking out, or that you were even wondering, or that this press conference even had to happen. Yes, I get the lineage of Pat Narduzzi in Michigan State. Yes, I get what Pitt fans dealt with Paul Chryst and how maybe that feels similar. A key difference, Pat Narduzzi's already been there for several years, whereas Paul Chryst was just walking in the door, it seemed. So this hasn't really been an internship for Narduzzi. This has been his first legit job as a head coach in college football. And again, while he's underachieved in some games, while he maybe could have done better, while there's certain things to criticize and he's not handled the media well, my colleagues who cover that team on the regular, Alan Saunders, for example, he's told me stories about time with Pat Narduzzi and how he seems to be locking up the ship and not wanting to share things with the media more than even the Steelers do, or more than West Virginia as a similar counterpart in terms of college football, in terms of access. Those places allow more access, and Narduzzi allows less than even Pitt allowed prior to him. Narduzzi doesn't seem to like any type of coverage unless it's positive, and there's plenty to criticize. I get it. You're just keeping it real, and I get it could be better than Narduzzi. But it also, again, can be much worse. But look at D'Antonio. Look at what he's done over his time, not only in college football, you can see Cincinnati before there, but then Michigan State on. 2007 all the way to 2019 last year. And 2019 was actually a worse year than Pitt had. 7-6 Pinstripe Bowl, they did win. Pitt wins a bowl game, but Pitt was 8-5. Granted, different conferences, and that's Big Ten. So I'm also going to speak on this being the Big Ten being more difficult than the ACC, mostly, and D'Antonio being there longer and having more overall success, because you're not just seeing a couple eight-win seasons like Narduzzi had, which, yes, could be worse, but that's the best it's been. You're looking at here for D'Antonio, 11 wins, yes, then 7, but then 13, which was a Rose Bowl. 11, 12, 10, then the 2 sevens. Nothing really worse than There's 1-3-9 season that's really, really bad. There's a 6-win season, but mostly 7 or better in terms of wins. But when he has a great year, even in the Big Ten, it's really, really great. And as you see again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 or more double-digit victory seasons in there for D'Antonio. And the 13-win season, 13-1, in which they won the Rose Bowl, which was historic for that program for sure, and that was not that long ago, just back in 2013. 11-12 wins the next 2 years to follow. 11 wins twice in 2 of the previous 3 years prior to that. Not only do you get the Rose Bowl victory, but you get major, or at least legit bowl games in terms of a Cotton Bowl win, Outback Bowl victory, Capital One Bowl, even though you lose. Capital One Bowl again, even though you lose. Alabama Bowl, that's kind of mediocre, but you're there. It's better than others, and you lose. But a Cotton Bowl win, a Rose Bowl win, 6 double-digit victory seasons, 5 seasons with 11 more or more victories, a 12-win season, and a 13-1 year, including that Rose Bowl title, which clearly culminates and is the highlight of D'Antonio's tenure. And I'm not saying College Football Hall of Fame by any means, but I'm saying Michigan State puts him in some type of Hall of Honor or whatever they're doing over there at MSU. He certainly deserves it, as Nick Saban before him, but a much shorter tenure. Maybe the best coach in that program history, or at least the modern times. I'll certainly say that. So, number one, why would Michigan State be interested in Narduzzi? While I said what I said earlier in this show, that Pitt could do much worse than Narduzzi and should actually be at least happy that there's not a worse situation coming in and there's not rebuilding coming in and that there is some continuity, Narduzzi's 8-win seasons at best, mediocre campaigns, only having a special year because you're winning a mediocre division, doing it in a weaker conference in the ACC, at least recently, not anywhere near better or even comparable to D'Antonio winning a 13 games 1 year, the Rose Bowl win, the Cotton Bowl win, 6 10-plus win seasons, 5 11-plus win seasons, etc. And yeah, there's some 7-win seasons mixed in, but overall the tenure was much, much better for D'Antonio at Michigan State than it's been for Narduzzi at Pitt, even though it's about half as many years. I highly doubt 5+ more years from now you're going to see Narduzzi doing what that resume is that we just saw at Michigan State and what Michigan State's done over the past decade. And it'll be rough for Michigan State moving forward in terms of if any sanctions are handed down and D'Antonio getting the hell out of there before they could be. But regardless, that would be a gigantic step down in terms of hiring. I get he has the connection to Michigan State, maybe brings it up, and who else would they get? Because this isn't Michigan, this isn't USC, this isn't Oklahoma, this isn't Alabama, this isn't Clemson, this isn't Texas, this isn't Oklahoma, whether there'll be programs who are currently successful like Clemson, Alabama, or historic programs with at least a history touch and recent success, and programs with the marketing ability in the major markets that people would always want to be at, those prestigious schools, those marquee schools like the Oklahomas, the USCs. Yes, USC's not been winning recently, but people still want to be there. That's a destination job still. If you turn that around, you're a legend, and there's so much history there, and you're in the LA market. Pitt has the history, but they're not in the LA market. They're not like USC. It's not going to be as quick of a turnaround. It's not a destination job. Pitt is not a destination job. Neither is West Virginia. Neither is Michigan State. Michigan State is not a destination job. But they've had a Hall of Fame style coach and a Hall of Fame style tenure the past decade plus. And they would be going down in terms of hiring Narduzzi. It'd be a worse hire. It'd be a worse situation. It'd be a guy who's accomplished less than the previous guy they had. So why automatically would everybody believe that they would immediately want him? Just because of the connection? Was there nothing else pulling them together? It's not like Narduzzi was really, really impressing at Pitt to then garner another job. He was doing okay. He was, holding water. He's pedaling. Couple good years, but nothing to immediately write home about. 8-5 this past year. Okay, that's good. Better than Michigan State, but not over the entire tenure. And I think this kind of summarizes perfectly. The Narduzzi realizes he could have done better, but he also could have done much worse at Pitt. Pitt is still a good school for him. He's a mediocre head coach. He has a ceiling of where he can go and what he can do. Same with the Pitt program. And they're almost a perfect marriage. But at the same time, Michigan State maybe wouldn't even be interested in him in the first place. I get the rumors were out there. I get the reports were out there. But if I'm a Michigan State guy, I don't know if I want to go from what they just had over the last 10 plus years, 12 years, 13 years there, to what Narduzzi's done. I don't know if I feel comfortable that Narduzzi's going to turn that around and going to do that. And I get what Chris did at Wisconsin, but that's been a bit of a roller coaster ride as well. So this whole hoopla, it was nice for off-season talk. It got me to do a pitch show here for Mike Trop on Pittsburgh Sports Live. But in all reality, Narduzzi's staying. Again, the quotes, rumors, squash them. I'm here at Pitt, and that's where I want to be. So Narduzzi wants to be at Pitt. And Narduzzi's going to be at Pitt. And Narduzzi fits in at Pitt. But Pitt also could do worse than Narduzzi and should be happy he's there because it brings some continuity to the school. Whereas Michigan State, in a way, should also be happy because they could maybe strive for more, strive to get somebody else. And in all reality, I think Narduzzi also realizes that maybe the Michigan State job isn't actually better moving forward because, yes, it's in a tougher conference. Yes, there's more recent history. Yes, overall, you would think it was a better job because of that. But they also have some sanctions coming to them. And if those sanctions come to them and bring them anything of a couple-year bowl ban or anything like that, then he's actually better off at Pitt. It's an easier conference, an easier division. He hasn't been as successful as they've been over the last decade, but there has been years where they were. So Narduzzi and Pitt are almost the perfect marriage right now. And there's reason to actually be happy that he is staying at Pitt. The fan base that should be more concerned about the future, despite the past being better, is Michigan State. And while you would think that they would need to do better than Narduzzi, and why would they want him? Maybe that's actually, as I talk myself maybe out of this, maybe that's the best they could do because they know what's coming down. But if no sanctions, then they could have done better. Regardless, though, the Pitt fan maybe has a brighter future than the Michigan State fan. Maybe Narduzzi realized that. And either way, Narduzzi and Pitt make sense together, at least still right now. And both sides could do much worse than each other. Well, that's going to do it for this one here. I wanted to touch on this Pitt news as it actually crept up and became kind of the news of the week, or at least the news of the day or so here, and it made sense to touch on it here on the channel. It's all you're seeing, main headlines, as well as what's going on with Pitt basketball and Duquesne basketball around the city and recruiting too over there at Pittsburgh Sports Now. So again, want to make sure to hit up the mothership, Pittsburgh Sports Now, Pittsburgh Hockey Now, Steelers Now, WVSportsNow.com. Yes, we now have ventured over there, also covering the Mountaineers, even though a rival of Pitt, but they're both in the same media market, so it can make sense. Pittsburgh Soccer Now as well. Make sure to find us all through social, Pittsburgh Sports Live on Facebook, Pittsburgh Sports Live, there it is. On Twitter, at PGH Sports Live on Twitter, also at PGH Sports Now on Twitter, and Pittsburgh Sports Now for the Facebook page, again, of the mothership. They don't need much social help, but go there anyway and like and follow. But mostly do it for Pittsburgh Sports Live as well on Facebook and on Twitter. And also find us on the Pittsburgh Sports Live website where we archive a lot of this video content, no matter what Now site it's affiliated with, at pghsportslive.com. Again, Pitt could do much worse. Pitt could do much worse than Pat Narduzzi. But Pat Narduzzi could do much worse than Pitt. Both sides realize it. That's why Heather Lyke was so happy. And who knows what the future may hold. Yes, there's things to criticize. But continuity should be one thing that Pitt fans care about. And there actually will now be some since these Michigan State rumors have been squashed. And rumors that maybe shouldn't even existed in the first place. Maybe presumptuous rumors in the first place.